So Chief, what is the APD doing, I guess, in general, related to use of lethal force or those type of situations anyway?
Well, as you know, as I think most of the public knows, we changed some of our policies about use of force as it applies to shooting at vehicles in the late spring, early summer time frame. And we said back then that, after we changed the policy, which we felt we had to do right away, we would come out with new training for the officers, new tactics that they could employ that would help them implement the new policy and still be safe and keep the community safe. And we've done that. We had our training in September and part of October. We had all the officers out driving cars and practicing the new end game. But part and parcel to that also was just looking at our policies in general on use of force, not just deadly force, but less lethal force, minor force, the whole range of the force spectrum. And so we're doing that now. We've hired a consultant. He's here. He was here a couple weeks ago. I saw him back at IACP last week in Philadelphia, and he's back this week to train the other half of our supervisors. We kind of divided them into two groups, and he's instructing us right now on the latest in case law, the latest in liability issues, best practices in terms of where our policies ought to be. I think our policies are pretty close to being where they ought to be, but we're getting some ideas of some things we should tweak. You need to do this exercise every so often, every 4 or 5 years probably. Actually, probably we look at them annually, but this is sort of a deeper housekeeping effort. We review our policies annually, but this time we're really dismantling them, rebuilding them from the ground up. And we've hired some pretty good talent to come in and help us through that exercise. So what you're seeing here is a combination of our supervisors and commanders getting the latest on policy and concept and case law, and you're also seeing us going through the mechanics of the internal debate. How are we going to assimilate this information? How are we going to rewrite these policies, get them approved, get them trained to the officers and supervisors, and get them rolled out? Our goal is to have the new policies in place on January 1. So, that's a lot of work when you figure we started in June.
Right. And, there have been a couple kind of high-profile cases where the community reacted to the use of lethal force. For instance, is this kind of a push that is in reaction to that, at least in part, or does that play into this change in policy?
Well, we would be doing this on some level anyway, but the urgency of getting all this that I've discussed with you done in 6 months is because we were seeing trends that we didn't like. We didn't like the way pursuits were ending. We didn't like the number of shootings we were having. Though statistically, there were too many of them based on what we would usually have in a year. So certainly wanted to get on that. When we see a trend develop, we want to get on that trend and try and do something about it, and that's what you're seeing right now. So there is some urgency because of that. There's going to be other things coming out soon. I think you're going to see a couple more reports come out. We'll go into those things at another date. It's not for discussion today, but I think you're going to see between now and the end of the year that we have invited outsiders to come in and evaluate what we're doing here. And you're seeing one of those efforts today, and I think you'll see 2 more similar. We'll be touching the story 2 more times, I think, by the end of the year.
Okay. The trend, I guess, what we've sort of heard as maybe the problem or the cause of that trend is like people's behavior, right? People behaving in such a way that force is going to be used or need to be used maybe more often. Is that
well? Certainly we saw a new behavior, and I can tell you I heard a lot about it in Philadelphia last week at the IACP annual meetings. This business about people ramming officers and officers having to shoot at vehicles, all the chiefs are talking about it.
Yeah.
They're dealing with this nationwide. I didn't recognize that. I realized that we were seeing something different here in Anchorage, but I didn't appreciate the extent to which people were seeing that across the country until last week. So that we're all wrestling with this. All the chiefs are. So yes, the answer to your question is we are seeing a different behavior on the part of the suspects out there. But that doesn't mean we don't look at our internally as well. How are we reacting to this new threat? Can we get better at it? And that's what we're about today.
What are people? I mean, why is that behavior changing, or why are you seeing it more? I mean, I haven't heard maybe why, specifically if there's one reason or anything, but
I haven't heard either.
What are people saying?
It'd be a great thing for some sociologists to study. I don't know the answers. I suspect we have a generation of folks that have grown up with, I don't know if it's movies and video games or, I'm not there's so many opportunities now where you interact, kids growing up interact with media that has to do with crashing and shooting and everybody lives, and maybe that's part of what's going on. I don't know. Maybe we have a generation of folks that are kind of disconnected socially. They don't have those interpersonal connections. Those are just ideas. I don't know that I can prove them, but it seems to me that they don't have a lot of what we're seeing is now people that just don't have that human connection, and they're willing to run risks and do outrageous things that people wouldn't do before, either because they didn't want to kill themselves or they didn't want to kill the cops, even though they're criminals. Mostly criminals and cops actually get along pretty well most of the time. There's a set of rules and everybody just kind of follows them, but that seems to have changed.
And the last thing I want to ask you is, do the officers feel that they're going to be able to protect themselves in these kind of situations?
Well, I think there's 350 officers, and each one probably has his or her own opinion on this. We are trying to, I hope they feel, and what we've tried to show them is that, yes, we restricted a little bit of their discretion on one hand, but we gave them some new tactical tools and some new training to make up the difference. What we are not saying, and I don't know that all the media understands this, and I know there are some commentators out there who don't understand it. They think we just took something away from the cops. They think what we're doing is we're saying we're going to let these people go, we're not going to arrest them. That's not what we're saying. We took away a dangerous situation, we feel, and replaced it with a new method of making the capture, which is less dangerous to the officers, to the citizens, and most importantly to the bystanders who are getting caught up in these crazy, out-of-control situations with bullets flying and cars spinning around. So I think we're still, and I think the officers are getting that. I think after the training, particularly when we practice some of these new techniques this fall, I think they're getting more comfortable with it. At least I hope they are.
Okay. Hey, thanks. I appreciate it.
You bet.